And so maybe instead of just waiting for people to be willing, we invite their willingness. And so get better at receiving feedback by soliciting it. And actually, solicited feedback is easier to accept and embrace than unsolicited feedback. So this kind of plays into this as well, is that instead of waiting for it or maybe not receiving it as well when it's unsolicited, is that we just start asking for it. And every time we do, we get better at receiving it. Welcome to Culture Change RX, the podcast for healthcare professionals that are committed to creating a thriving workplace culture, improving the experiences of employees and patients, and ultimately unlocking their organization's next level of potential. I'm Sue Tetzlaff, your host and co-founder of Capstone Leadership Solutions. Join me and my insightful guests each week as we share actionable insights for navigating the crucial people side of the business of healthcare. Subscribe now for a weekly dose of Culture Change RX. Now let's dive into this week's conversation where culture change takes center stage. Welcome to another episode of Culture Change RX. This is a Culture Byte episode, which is a solo episode, a little bit shorter, and just me in the studio, Sue Tetzlaff, the host of Culture Change RX. So we have seen it enough to believe that it's true that through frequent, well-timed, and well-intended feedback offered up freely and welcomed graciously and perceived as an act of caring, healthcare organizations can supercharge their efforts to create a positive work environment where people feel appreciated, accountable, supported, cared for, and noticed. So there is a lot of things packed into having a high feedback culture. And really effective and caring methods for giving and receiving feedback, we consider them to be superpowers that yield many benefits for individuals, work units, entire organizations. And in healthcare, it's even a superpower for improving patient care. Because really, when you think about it, feedback helps people feel appreciated, provides reinforcement, course correction, and accountability as we strive to uphold our high standards for things like our patient care standards and work performance, and even our behavior standards, right? And it also supports our efforts to make necessary changes. So feedback is a superpower, and it's super important in our efforts to always be getting better as individuals, teams, and entire organizations. So really, what is feedback? It's that act of noticing the behaviors or actions around us and then speaking up about what's noticed. If it's something that's positive or in keeping with our high standards or showing improvement or trying, then when we give that feedback, we're speaking up in such a way that we're probably giving a compliment, right? We notice something compliment worthy and we speak up to give feedback such as a compliment. And so we call that informal in the moment feedback. I noticed. And then I speak up and I relay the compliment. Or it could be a call out, right? So that in the moment feedback could be a call out, such as speaking up when behaviors or actions could be improved or changed for the better, such as those that are below the expected standard or not in keeping with policy or practice. So feedback, again, it's a superpower and super important. Now, having a high feedback culture can be a very challenging endeavor, right? But we think it's an extremely worthwhile one. And so really when you think about some of the core things that have to happen to make this happen and come alive in your culture is that you really have to establish giving and receiving feedback as a core competency of leaders. We like to say leaders go first. Right? So when we're working with our partner organizations, one of the core 9 leadership practices is giving and receiving feedback. And so there's a lot of effort going into training and developing the competency, consistency, and comfort level of our leaders in organizations in giving and receiving feedback. And when they get good at it, right, and they start doing it and they start doing it better and better and better, they're actually role modeling it for others, right? So if they're giving feedback to an employee, the employee is on the receiving end, and they're watching and they're learning how the leader is doing this and how they're engaged in that with the leader. So really the leader's role modeling it by actually doing it. And then we have to formally champion that giving and receiving feedback is a core competency of everyone, not just leaders. We call that omnidirectional feedback. So really having feedback that's coming in all directions. So a dietary aide giving feedback to a physician, my goodness sakes, that could actually happen, right? That it's not just leaders giving feedback to employees, that employees might give feedback to their leader. We would welcome that, right? That's how leaders get better in their work of being a leader of employees, is to get feedback from those they lead and be open to receiving that feedback. And so anyone from peer to peer, a boss to employee, employee to boss, providers to nurses, nurses to providers, etc. It can come in all directions. And we want to create a culture where that's fully embraced as this is how we do it around here. We give and receive feedback because it's a superpower and it's super important. But really, to make this all happen, we truly have to see some really intentional efforts around normalizing feedback as an act of caring, especially that feedback that is maybe that call out where something's below standard or could be better, is that we normalize that as really an act of caring. I care about our patients, I care about our high standards, I care about our culture and our work environment and our outcomes and our results and our improvements, and I care about my coworkers. And so just normalizing feedback as an act of caring, that we're willing to give it because we care, and we're willing to receive it because we care. There's some tips that we have and we like to share. And actually, I'm going to put it in the show notes. Is I have an article. It was actually a guest blog for Kim Scott, and she's the author of Radical Candor and Radical Respect. We really love her work. It resonates with us. While Capstone, we have our own model for giving and receiving feedback. We have a body of knowledge that we use in teaching leaders and teaching employees in healthcare organizations on feedback. There's just so much work out there by other people like Kim Scott, and we think it's very helpful for people to explore other work. And so maybe one of her books resonates with you. Both of them might resonate with you. Radical Candor, Radical Respect. And also she has a blog on her website, Radical Candor. And I was happy to make a contribution to that as a guest blogger on the topic of feedback in healthcare organizations and normalizing it as an act of caring. So within that blog, I provided 6 tips for caring feedback. Now, the first one is to be specific, and in particular, using some statements such as I noticed, I heard, I saw, I discovered, as a way to help you be more specific when you're given either a compliment or a call out in the moment. So I noticed that on that last patient registration that you didn't capture the image of their insurance card. That's a way to call somebody out if you have a practice protocol or standard for every registration, every time capturing the image of the insurance card, right? So the tip is to really use the words I noticed, I heard, I saw, I discovered, and being very specific in that call out or even that compliment. I noticed that all of your registrations today included a copy of the image of their insurance card, right? So there's a great example. So we want to be very specific when we're complimenting or calling it out, or it's not really going to be a superpower, right? And I love the words of Brene Brown, who says, clear is kind and unclear is unkind. So if we give a compliment or a call out that's not clear, it is actually not an act of caring, right? Because it's unkind to give unclear feedback. Tip number 2 is before jumping into a call out when, somebody's action or behavior is outside of the standard or could be improved, a good tip here is to ask permission before you engaged in giving the specific feedback. So it might be something like, I noticed something that I'd like to share with you. Do you have a minute now to talk about it? And so this really creates an opportunity for them to say yes to this opportunity to receive feedback. It's kind of like a micro ask and a micro offer of permission to engage. It starts to be a key word or a key phrase in the organization that people kind of know what's coming at them, and they maybe don't get their defenses up, and they remember that it's an act of caring, that somebody is going to share something with them, and it's an act of caring when they do. And so these could be keywords. So tip number 2 is before you jump right into a call out, you could have that micro ask to get permission. And you could do that by saying something as simple, I noticed something I'd like to share with you. Do you have a minute now to talk about it? Tip number 3 is a great way to end a compliment and call out is with a question that sparks a conversation. So feedback might seem one way, right? I'm giving you feedback, I'm communicating a compliment or a call out to you. But a great way to end a compliment or call out is to ask a question. And that might actually engage in some dialogue, which is now a two-way conversation versus a one-way communication. So some questions we might want to ask if it's a call out is, what ideas do you have for making this better? Or how can I help? What might be causing your struggle with this? And if it's a compliment, you might want to say, wow, other people are struggling with this. What are your tips for success for capturing every insurance card every time? Maybe that would be a great thing we could share with others. So what are your tips for success, right? These questions are all motivated by caring to offer help, caring to want to help them understand what makes it better, caring to pay their success forward and harvest that and their tips and tricks for the benefit of others. So that's tip number 3. Tip number 4 that can help you with a caring feedback culture is, really we want to keep our relationships and our work environment positive. So this tip is about striving to give 3 times more compliments than call outs over the course of time. So it's not like we run around with a spreadsheet or a tally notebook, but really it's about this spirit of we want to make sure that we're giving 3 times more compliments than call outs to keep our culture and our relationships positive. And so really what I mean by that truly is just having that spirit of maybe even changing the definition of what's worthy of a compliment. Sometimes we might hold on to this idea that above and beyond is the only, behavior or actions that are compliment worthy. But really, if we change our definition and open it up to, if somebody is meeting standard, let's compliment them because what gets recognized gets repeated and we want them to stay in standard. So if their behavior or performance is within standard, we don't have to wait for it to be above and beyond to give them a compliment about that behavior or that action. As well, if they were struggling with something and you notice them trying to improve it, or you see them trying something new, even though they're not above and beyond or even at standard yet, maybe you got a new piece of technology or a new protocol or something, and they're giving it a go, that's compliment worthy as well. So sometimes to really maintain or keep that ratio of 3 times more positive, we have to open up our mind to new definitions of what's worthy of a compliment. And it's not just to withhold them for things that are above and beyond. And definitely we don't want to miss those moments, and to recognize and compliment and praise those. But we want to also keep lots of compliments coming. But if we're going to increase the quantity of them, we want to make sure that we also increase the quality of them. And that goes back to tip number 1, which is being very specific. If we get generic just to try to have a lot more compliments, great job today, good job with Mr. Jones in room 202 today, those kind of generic things that really aren't specific. I noticed, I observed, I heard, I saw very specific behaviors or actions. That's what we want. So tip number 4, you kind of have to combine that with being specific, because if you're going to increase the quantity of compliments to get at that 3-to-1 ratio of 3 times more compliments and call outs, you don't want them to be non-specific or insincere or unclear just to keep the quantity up. And then tip number 5 is when we're on the receiving end of a compliment or call out, the best response is simply to say thank you. It's weird how many people, including me, in certain moments get really awkward when somebody gives you a compliment, right? And so you don't receive it well. You don't embrace the spirit and the caring nature of it. And maybe you get awkward and you diminish or minimize your behavior or action. Maybe you throw a compliment right back at somebody in the awkwardness of the moment. But truly, it's just to take it in and to say thank you. And so same thing with a call out. And actually, those might be harder to receive with a thank you, right? Thank you for caring enough to share that with me. And so we want to be thankful for the people that are willing to give us feedback. And every time they do, thank them for that feedback. Now, it doesn't mean you have to agree with it. It doesn't mean you're going to act on it, because sometimes maybe their feedback is something that, you process and you're not sure that there's a pearl there for you, that there's an opportunity there for you. But thank them for their willingness, thank them for their feedback. And so tip number 5 is, in response, being on the receiving end of a compliment or call out, simply say thank you. And then tip number 6 is get better at receiving feedback by asking for it more often from many different people. So oftentimes, again, people are not as willing to give feedback. And if we want to normalize this and increase people's willingness, maybe we just start asking a lot for it, right? And showing that we're open to it, that we want it, that we're willing to have it come our way. And so maybe instead of just waiting for people to be willing, we invite their willingness. And so get better at receiving feedback by soliciting it. And actually, solicited feedback is easier to accept and embrace than unsolicited feedback. So this kind of plays into this as well, is that instead of waiting for it or maybe not receiving it as well when it's unsolicited, is that we just start asking for it. And every time we do, we get better at receiving it. Ask and model your willingness to receive it well. And so there are 6 tips for creating a culture of more caring feedback in the moment in your workplace. But if you want to see the full article and blog that is posted on Kim Scott's Radical Candor blog, it's titled A Healthcare Organization's 3-Point Pathway to Normalizing Feedback as an Act of Caring. If you want to read the whole article and see these actual tips in writing, you can access it through the link that I'll share in the show notes. So cheering you and your organization, your team on to normalizing feedback as an act of caring and really embracing feedback as a superpower because of its super importance and elevating behavior, performance, and outcomes in your organization. And in keeping with our capstone mantra of just start, consider how yet today you could give 3 compliments and start building that ratio of compliments to call outs by starting with positivity and looking for and noticing compliment worthy actions and behaviors all around you, and then giving that caring and specific compliment in the moment. So have fun with that and just start and keep going. Thanks for tuning in to Culture Change RX. If you found value in today's episode and you are a believer in fostering change in healthcare, join us in making a difference. Follow, rate, and review our podcast on your favorite platform. Share it with colleagues and your network. Together, we can make a lasting impact. Until next week, keep inspiring positive change.